From the studios of Books in Motion, this is Damon Abdallah reading The Prison of Shadows, Book 2 in the Shards of Shadow series by Joseph R. Lallo. Now, let's begin with Chapter 1. A blaring tone jolted Alan roughly from sleep. He fumbled for his phone to silence it. When peace was restored, he blinked blearily at his darkened room. Alan was an early riser. He seldom had to contend with the sun, but the circumstances of the last few weeks had persuaded him to get blackout curtains. He'd become accustomed to them quite quickly. In truth, they did help him sleep a bit better, but that wasn't the reason he'd bought them. Judging from the potent scent of coffee filling the air, the person who'd motivated that change, and a dozen others in his life, was well into her morning routine already. He grabbed his robe from where he'd hung it on the back of his computer chair. Though there was hardly any light, he could still see his shadow stretched out like a ribbon on the floor before him. It led under the door in a way that a proper shadow never would. He tugged the door open and marched down the short hallway from his bedroom into his kitchenette. The only light came from the dim bulb of the stove hood. It wasn't much, but it was enough to cast a shadow. That shadow should have led back down the hallway behind him. Instead, it bobbed up and down on the wall beside the coffee maker, hands rubbing together expectantly. If its behavior was an indication enough that this wasn't a run-of-the-mill shadow, a pair of white eyes blinking at him from it hammered that point home nicely. "You're up," she said. Her tone was a nuanced mix of excitement and impatience. "And you're making coffee," he said thickly. "Second pot," she said. The silhouette shifted until it looked as though it was being cast by someone sitting on the counter. She reached out to the shadow of a coffee canister and grasped it. The canister itself obligingly rose into the air as she lifted its shadow. "We're out of the Jamaican stuff," she said. "We're out of, huh?" His sleepy brain reluctantly got up to speed. Wait, second pot? You drank an entire pot of coffee already?" She placed a hand on her hip. "What do you expect? It's not as though I can waste 4 hours a day sleeping like you." Alan rubbed his eyes. "Most people do closer to 8, Blot." "Most people are lazy," she said. She reached up and pulled a cup from the cabinet, then lifted the pot to fill it for him. "Here, wake up. You've got work to do." He accepted the cup and took a careful sip of the steamy beverage. It was hot, but that was only part of the reason to go easy on his first taste. This was Blot's coffee. The concoction met his lips, and his face nearly turned inside out. She'd been experimenting with the coffee maker with the same zeal as a mad scientist who had discovered a new element. Every day he was treated to exciting new frontiers of bitterness as she endeavored to make the strongest possible cup. "You know, the goal of brewing coffee isn't to try to get a lethal dose of caffeine into your first sip," he muttered, giving it another try. "This would be a lot easier if you'd just buy that espresso machine," she said. "I hear those things are much better at the strong stuff." "We can't afford it right now." "And whose fault is that?" she jabbed. "Which reminds me." Blot quickly filled a cup of her own and drifted around the walls of the kitchen. The cup traced the path she would have walked if she'd been a flesh-and-blood creature rather than a living shadow. She stopped at the table and sat. Alan's laptop was set up on the table, something his sleep-deprived mind had only just been able to process. Blot grabbed the shadow of the mouse and waggled it to wake the screen. She shuddered as the screen flicked on. Its light wasn't enough to push Blot around in the way that the ceiling light might, but it still hit her like a slap in the face. When she'd shaken it off, she pecked out a search term in the address bar. Magnuson Scandal. It was surreal, watching the keys of the keyboard clinking down on their own. He found himself slightly relieved that she wasn't a faster typist. Seeing the keys clacking away at that sort of speed would have made him feel like this was some updated version of the player piano gag in a cheesy haunted house. The images that populated his screen were many and varied, but many were quite familiar. He'd taken most of them. Poorly framed, poorly lit, taken at weird angles. He felt a sting of professional shame in seeing their poor quality. In his defense, he'd taken most of them while fearing for his life, but that didn't make him feel any better about being the most successful images of his career, being among his worst. "Do you see what I see?" Blot asked.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?